What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for Game Week 12. So I'm going to run you through how the team is looking, talk through all the flag players I've got and what I'm going to do with them, and why I might take my first hit of the season. And I'll quickly run you through how I did in Game Week 11 before all of that as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And make sure to check out Fantasy Football Hub. Forget Black Friday. They've got Green Friday, trying to get you those green arrows. There's 30% off at the moment and a 30-day free trial. You can make use of all the tools they've got for 30 days, see if you like it, and then decide what to do after that. If you want to give it a go, links in the description below as always. Otherwise, let's get into it. So let's start with how I did in Game Week 11, which feels like it was ages ago at this point, so I'll try and keep this quick. It was another pretty good week for me, so I got 67 points, and that was enough to take me up to 1.2 million overall rank, which is still not great, but it's up from 2.9 million in just 2 game weeks. So going into Game Week 10, I was 2.9 million, now I'm 1.2. So that feels pretty nice, and that has coincided with doing the Haaland to Salah switch, and Haaland captaincy in 10 and 11 has been great, and Haaland hasn't got any big scores or anything like that. Now, obviously, that's not always going to be the case. Haaland will score plenty of goals over the next few weeks, and it'll be more difficult to get those green arrows. But right now, I'm going to enjoy it while it's lasting. And Game Week 11 was actually quite similar to Game Week 10 in that not actually many players returned for me. I think in Game Week 10, I only had like 3 players that returned. Let me just double check. It was Salah captain, Fernandes, and Solanke. That was it. So 3 players returned. And in Game Week 11, it was only 4 players. So Salah captaincy was 28 points. Fernandes' 17-pointer is a massive differential. Probably one of the best moments of the season for me so far. And then in Burma and Raul Jimenez got assists. That's it. So 3 players returned in 10. 4 players returned in 11. And it's been enough to go up 1.7 million overall rank. Mostly because players like Saka, Palmer, and Haaland just haven't got any big scores or anything like that. The only real downside to my team is that I benched Fabianski. It was a close call between him and Raya, but I think deep down I was always going to play the Arsenal man. And I think Arsenal defended pretty well in that game. Like the goal they conceded, I think, was from Neto outside of the box. There wasn't really a huge amount of other chances in that game. So was that a bad decision? Maybe, but I feel like it was quite close. And if I'd benched Raya and Arsenal had finally got a clean sheet while they were in my squad, that wouldn't have felt great. So look, I wish I'd played Fabianski. As I always say, it doesn't matter how well you do in FPL, there's always something you could have done better. But 67 points and 1.2 million rank from where I was is pretty nice. Otherwise, of course, yeah, the Arsenal double defence blanked again. Trent went off injured in a game where Liverpool kept a clean sheet, which is massively frustrating because he was a big differential. Pinnock 1 point we've come to expect. Palmer, I've got to say, I am so lucky that I've not been heavily punished by that move so far. I did Son to Saka in Game Week 10, I think it was. And Son, obviously, up against Ipswich, played the whole game, which I wasn't expecting, and blanked. Like, I'm so lucky that he didn't do more damage to me because I think that wasn't... Like, I don't think it was a terrible move to bring Palmer in when I did, but fixture-wise, it didn't look great. And it really was a move that I made based on Son's minutes, which I got wrong. I got it right in the first game, but not the second one. So I've got a bit lucky there. And yeah, Bruno Fernandes 17 point. I enjoyed that one, as you might imagine. Otherwise, Solanke blank against Ipswich is just peak FPL after he got a 16 pointer the week before. And then Strand Larsen was my transfer in Game Week 11. I took out Dominic Calvert-Lewin after he blanked for me for 6 game weeks in a row. And what I'm about to say does have a bit of hindsight attached to it, because had Strand Larsen got a goal or 2, I wouldn't be sitting here saying that I think that was maybe a bad move. So there is some hindsight, right? I'm openly saying that. But I look back on Calvert-Lewin to Strand Larsen and I wonder whether I really needed to make that move. Like, Calvert-Lewin had had his minutes reduced the week before, but it always looked like he was going to start in Game Week 11. West Ham away, not a terrible fixture. And you'd rather play Southampton at home, absolutely. But it wasn't a massive upgrade. And I think I fell into the trap of, I'm going to make this move to free up money for my future moves. And that's the plan. And it's going to work out really nicely. But as I say many times, stuff can happen. So when people say to me, I'm going to make this move because I don't need the transfer, team looks great in future weeks, injuries and suspensions can always happen. So unless it's a big upgrade, I wonder whether it's really worth making the move versus rolling a transfer. Like I say, hindsight attached to that because Strand Larsen blanked, and obviously Trent did go and pick up an injury. But had I rolled the transfer, I'd be on exactly the same amount of points, but I'd be in a much more flexible position for game week 12. I could deal with that Trent injury if he's out, and then also use that money straight away for free with my second transfer. Whereas now, if I sell Trent to someone cheap, I've got to take a hit if I want to use that money straight away. So I don't think Calvert-Lewin to Strand Larsen was a terrible move, but part of the reason to do it was to free up some money to then do Rico Lewis out in game week 12 to a cheap defender, and then Fernandes up to Saka in game week 13 or 14 whenever I wanted to do it. But now I'm looking at my team thinking, well, I can sell Trent, that's lots of money freed up, and I don't really want to sell Fernandes. Other issues have now cropped up. I wish I had an extra transfer to deal with it. So definitely some hindsight there. But I think unless it's a big upgrade going forward, I probably will question a little bit more about whether I need to make the move. Either way, I don't have Calvert-Lewin anymore, so that's kind of nice. But Strand Larsen not off to the greatest start, and also came off, way before the 90th minute. I think it was like 72 or something like that. Which is not ideal, but also I know he's not necessarily a 90-minute man every single week. Yeah, 72 minutes, 0.04 XG. Pretty bad. But anyway, he's in the team now. I don't have Calvert-Lewin. Good week. Let's take a look at game week 12. So going into game week 12, I've only got the one free transfer, but I do have 1.7 million in the bank. So there is a bit of money there if I want to upgrade any particular position. The main problem I've got this week is the same one that lots of you will have. A bunch of my players are flagged. So I've got 5 flags in total, and 3 of them are in defence. So it's not an ideal position to be in. And I'll warn you now, this video is going to be filled with a lot of, if we get this information, I'm going to make this move. But if the information says this instead, I'm going to make this move instead. Because realistically, I need to hear the managers in their press conferences before I make any final decisions. Let's start with the players that aren't flagged. So David Raya in goal, Forest at home. I've got Fabianski on the bench against Fulham at home. I'm definitely playing the Arsenal man again. And I've got Gabriel as well for the double up. I'm hoping this is the start of a clean sheet run for Arsenal. There's certainly no need to worry about them for my team because I've got bigger issues to deal with. So both of those are going to play. My only other defender that's not currently flagged is Rico Lewis. And the problem with him is he's got Spurs at home this week and Liverpool away in 13. So I'm not expecting a clean sheet either way. And obviously I don't know for sure that he's going to start either of those games. So he's not really that useful for me at the moment unless we get any indication that he's going to start. Greaves on the bench is a genuine issue. A genuine injury because we know that he was red flagged recently. So he's going to be back soon for Ipswich. But even if he was back in game week 12, it's Man United at home. So again, I'm not expecting a clean sheet. And I think in general, unless you've got Leif Davis, you're probably not wanting to play your Ipswich defenders that often. But I guess if I got really stuck and he was available from 13 onwards, Forest away, Palace at home, Bournemouth at home, Wolves away, I could maybe play him in one of those fixtures. But I wouldn't be expecting a clean sheet in any of them. So my bench looks fragile. And then in the back 3, alongside Gabriel, I've got Pinnock, who's yellow flagged, and Trent Alexander-Arnold that's orange flagged. And we know there's an issue there, a genuine one, because he went off with a hamstring problem in that Aston Villa game. Now, the last thing we heard on that, and this was just from a journalist, not straight from Slot, was that it's not thought to be serious and he could be back for that Southampton game. But they've got Real Madrid midweek and Man City in game week 13. I just don't see why you would take a risk with Trent against Southampton. You can just play Connor Bradley instead and still win that game, presumably fairly comfortably. So I think Trent's going to be out. And Pinnock might be out as well. We'll have to wait and see what Thomas Frank says. If both of those players are out, and I'm not confident on a Rico Lewis start, I think I'm taking a hit for 2 cheap defenders, which is like the least exciting thing you can ever do in FPL. But I might get put into a position where I have to do that. Like, if Trent is ruled fit, then possibly I could just keep him. Like if Slot says that he's back for the Southampton game, well, there's a possibility he's back. But I've kind of talked myself into the idea of just downgrading him now and using that money elsewhere, because downgrading Trent lets me keep Bruno Fernandes for the long term, which I quite like the idea of doing. So I think right now, presuming that Trent is going to miss the Southampton game, I'm selling him, and I'm probably going to sell him to either Lewis Hall, Levi Colwill, or Van Heck. I'm ruling out Ait-Nouri, not because I think he's a terrible option, but because he's 1 yellow card away from suspension. and I've just talked about the amount of issues in my defence, I can't afford to be bringing in a player for them then to get yellow carded and miss a game straight away, because then I'm being forced into another defender transfer the week after. Because if you look at my team on the My Team tool over the next couple of weeks, right, like I said earlier, 30% off, 30-day free trial at the moment. Make sure to check that out using the link in the description below. Let's say I do Trent out for Aït-Nouri, right? So we're just bringing it. I know he's very popular at the moment. That looks great. We'll just assume that Pinnock's fine, right? So let's just assume he's available for game week 12. So I can play Aït-Nouri, Pinnock, Gabriel this week. Let's say Aït-Nouri picks up a yellow card, though, for game week 13. Then I'm stuck with Lewis against Liverpool away or Greaves against Forest away. And right now, I don't even know if Greaves is available. And obviously, it might be that Aït-Nouri doesn't get that yellow card, but I just don't think it's worth the risk. So I don't see me bringing him in. I think Levi Colwill is extremely... He's also flagged, by the way, but I'm going to assume that Maresca will say he's fit. He's extremely boring, but there are so many fixtures where I could happily play him from like now all the way down to like game week 28. Like, there's not really a run of really bad games for Chelsea coming up anytime soon. I'm not saying they've got perfect fixtures, but you're looking at it as like even Villa at home in 13 is not easy, but if I've got to play him, it's not the end of the world. Like Spurs away in 15... The next game after that I'd think I don't really want to play him is City away in 23. And then after that, I guess Brighton away in 25, Villa away in 26, not ideal. But so many of these games between 12 and 22, you can just stick him in and not worry about it. So as much as he's quite a boring option and Chelsea defence isn't like outstanding and he doesn't have a huge amount of goal threat either, like for someone so cheap that you know is going to play when he's fit and available, he's very tempting, especially when I got as many issues that I do have. I think with Van Heck, it doesn't feel great bringing him in before Bournemouth away. But again, after that, they've got Southampton at home, Fulham away, Leicester away, Palace at home, West Ham away, Brentford at home. If I had to play him in all of these games, wouldn't be the end of the world. So I quite like them. I think the more exciting pick is Lewis Hall, because I think he's probably more attacking than both of those players I've just mentioned. And they also have some pretty nice fixtures outside of Liverpool at home in 14. Only slight concern is he's not 100% nailed on. I think it's very clear that he's first choice left back. I'm not arguing that at all. I think my only slight worry is if Lewis Hall was to get benched, it wouldn't be a massive shock. Maybe it'd be a little bit surprising, but not a massive shock. If Colwill or Van Heck were to get benched, that would be a shock. You wouldn't be expecting that. You wouldn't put any money on them being benched when they're fit and available. That's it. And it might seem like only a slight problem, and most people are looking at it as Lewis Hall is just the more exciting option, just go for him. But again, if he starts getting benched and I'm not confident in his minutes going forward, that's another defender that I've got to deal with at a time where I just don't have the defence to cope with it. Like if you're on wildcard, you're absolutely putting in Lewis Hall. You probably got him at 4.3 million. You've got 4 other defenders that won't be flagged, that will be available moving forward. You can deal with the odd benching. My defence can't. So if I had to say who I'm going to go for right now, I think it probably is Lewis Hall, because I kind of want to go for that more exciting pick, despite what I've just said. And playing him against West Ham at home and Palace away seems fine. But it's just, I don't know. I find it very difficult to pick the slightly risky pick when I've got so many issues right now, and that is playing on my mind. I think I'd be more keen to go for Lewis Hall if I get forced into a second defender transfer. Let's say we're not sure that Rico Lewis is going to start, and Pinnock and Greaves are both out, and so is Trent. Then I'm going to make 2 transfers in my defence. I think I would just bring in Lewis Hall as that more fun pick, and then just go for someone a little bit less exciting that you know is going to play, like Colwill, for example, against Leicester away this week. So I think that's kind of where I'm at the moment. One other thing I've got to think about is if I make the second transfer, who do I sell? Because Trent will free up a lot of money. So I could just sell Greaves and keep Rico Lewis. I mean, this week is proving very tricky for me. I'm hoping that managers come out and say that everyone is fit. It'll make it a bit easier, but that's not going to happen. Rico Lewis, I can't. So on one hand, I think he's extremely frustrating to own because you're not sure when he's going to start. But on the other hand, I think he's still quite a good value option, right? You've got a defender for Man City for less than 5 million, And from 14 onwards, you got some pretty good fixtures. But I know what's going to happen. I'm going to get to game week 14. I'm going to be doing my team selection video, sitting here saying, I want to play Rico Lewis, but I'm not sure if he's going to start. At least with Pinnock, right, when he's fit, and we'll find out hopefully how long he's going to be out for. You know he's going to always start. So you could keep him on the bench, like Forest at home in 17, Southampton away in 20, Newcastle at home in 15 if I get really stuck. These are fixtures that I could play him in, even though they're not the best on paper. So I think that would be my next problem, is if I sell Trent to Lewis Hall, that gives me 4.3 to spend. Who do I sell? Lewis, Pinnock, Greaves. I think Lewis has got the better fixtures coming up and is probably in the strongest defence, but the minutes aren't secure. Pinnock, terrible defence, but he plays when he's fit. And then Ipswich I just don't ever really trust. I think I'd probably sell one of Lewis or Greaves, but I'm really not... I'm not sure about that. Like, if Pinnock was out for just 1 week, like for Everton away, then you'd have Leicester at home in 13, so maybe I could keep him for that. I'm really not sure what I do. I don't want to sit here like for the next 5-10 minutes just saying I don't know what I'm doing. I tell you what, I do know what I'm doing. At least I'm pretty sure. Hall, Colwill, Van Heck. That's pretty much the 3 defenders that I've narrowed it down to. I'm not going to go for Aït-Nouri, and I'm also not going to go for a Man United defender, I don't think. Because I want Mazraoui, but I don't know if he's going to start. Dalot could be good, but we don't know if he's going to start. De Ligt at 5 million, I just don't think is better than Colwill, despite the fact that Man United have got a good amount of clean sheets so far. So I'm almost certainly making a defender transfer this week. It's just whether I make 2. And I think Hall and Colwill are probably the 2 that I'm looking at because they've got better fixtures this week. If I buy 1 defender this week and 1 next week, I'll probably go for a Brighton defender in 13 rather than... either Hall or Colwill, whoever I didn't buy, because the fixtures are better. I just think Bournemouth away this week is not great. Anyway, I'm just rambling. Defence is terrible. The flags are so annoying. I'm hoping that Pinnock's fine and I can just sell Trent and then use that money for an upgrade in attack instead. So let's talk about that. So for this week, it's looking pretty likely that I'm going to play a 5-man midfield. So it's a 3-5-2 formation. The first time I've played that since game week 4. I'll start again with the players that aren't flagged. So Bruno Fernandes obviously been in the team the whole season. It's Ipswich away this week. No need to look to get rid of him. And I think the more issues that crop up in my team, like injuries, suspensions and stuff like that, it just makes me want to keep Bruno Fernandes even more because he's one player that you can rely on just to not get injured. He's only got 1 yellow card so far this season, which actually is a little bit surprising, the amount he talks to refs and stuff like that. But that's great. He's not near a suspension. Never gets injured. Always plays. Going to play 90 minutes even under Amorim. I think he'll play in an attacking role. So even though... And when I say attacking role, obviously he's not going to go and play in defence, but he's going to play behind the striker rather than in the midfield too. That's going to be my assumption anyway. So even though he's got Arsenal away in 14 and City away in 16, I kind of just want to keep him the whole way through because I think the fixtures outside of that are pretty good. So if I can, I'm going to keep hold of Bruno. Salah is almost certainly going to be my captain this week. Like Trent, obviously Salah has got Real Madrid midweek and Man City the week after in game week 13, but he didn't play at all over the international break. He's had a complete rest. He's definitely going to start that Southampton game, and it's the kind of match where he could do damage in like 60, 70 minutes. So even if he does come off slightly earlier than normal, hopefully it won't be a major problem. I think looking at the rest of the team, he's probably going to be the standout captain. And then Morgan Rogers, who I've benched quite a bit recently, he's back in for Crystal Palace at home. And the nice thing for Rogers is he was away on international duty as he usually is during the breaks, but he was with the senior England team, not the under-21s, and so he didn't play as many minutes. And Unai Emery has spoken about the fact that he's a bit tired, fatigued, maybe needs a bit of a rest. He hasn't been that happy about him playing for the under-21s. But for the senior team, he came off the bench in both of those games, I believe. So hasn't had a huge amount of minutes either. So I think he's looking pretty good. In Burmo, like Pinnock, is also flagged. I'm not fully convinced that is a genuine issue or something that's going to keep him out long term. So right now, I've got no plans to move him on because I think he's going to play against Everton. He's never rested. Like he's like Bruno, always plays 80 to 90 minutes. So not a problem. If Thomas Frank says that Mbeumo's out, then I'll probably just bench him and play 3-4-3, especially if he's back for that Leicester game. I think I've spoken about this already during the break. Like, people keep mentioning how the fixtures turn in game week 14 for Brentford. I agree they get a little bit worse, but they're just not terrible for me. So if I get stuck with Mbeumo, I just don't think it's a problem whatsoever. I think right now, my general plan would be, if Trent goes for someone cheap, so let's just put Lewis Hall in here, that would give me enough money to upgrade Mbeumo straight to Saka. So in 14, that's maybe something that I will look at. But I've got no issues keeping Mbeumo over Christmas if that's what needs to be done. So as long as he's not out long term, he's staying. Palmer's also flagged as well. Not really a huge issue because the fixtures are so good for Chelsea now. I don't want to get rid of him even if he misses the Leicester game. He has been seen in training as well, so hopefully he'll be fine. The only slight worry I've got with Palmer is we know he's not in the European squad for Chelsea, and that's given them a chance to rest him a bit more. And I think they are managing the amount of minutes that he plays. And so that might be a problem during midweek games where they've got Premier League matches. And game week 14, for example, which is the midweek game week, that's Southampton away. And for me, that would probably be my captain because Salah's got, let me just find out who it is. It's Newcastle away, which is not terrible, right? If I have to captain Salah, it's fine. But ideally, I want to captain Palmer. And so if there's any doubts about his minutes for that game, because Chelsea want to keep managing him, I might just have to go elsewhere. So potentially over Christmas, if that is a big problem that Palmer's got, we might see him get more reduced minutes than we're expecting right now. But again, the fixture run is so good, and he's going to play the majority of these games. There's just no point in worrying about transferring him out. If Palmer and Mbeumo are both out, then honestly, I'm really not sure what I would do. I'll almost, like, if they're out for like 1 week and then back, I'll probably just have to bench both and play like a 4-3-3 and definitely make 2 defender transfers. I just don't want to get rid of Mbeumo and Palmer unless I absolutely have to. If Palmer was out long term and Saka was fit, then I'd probably just go straight to Saka. I don't think there's any point in going round and round in circles on these two because I suspect they're going to be fine, more so than Trent will be. So, yeah, hopefully one of them at least is back. If not, I might just have to play a 4-3-3. But I think the fixtures, especially for Palmer, are decent long term. For Mbeumo, less so. I guess put it this way. If Palmer was out for a week and Mbeumo was out long term and Trent was out, I'd probably just do the Trent to a cheap defender and Mbeumo to Saka and just be done with it and just bench Palmer for a week. I think essentially I'm going to have a bit more concrete decision making in the final thoughts video tomorrow once we've heard from all the managers. Yeah, it's just a mess at the moment. I think midfield, hopefully I'm just playing a 3-5-2 and all these players stay for me. And then up front, thankfully, none of my 3 forwards are currently flagged, although who knows, maybe that will change later today or tomorrow. So in the 11, I've got Raul Jimenez against Wolves at home, and then Strand Larsen against Fulham away, and it's Dominic Solanke on the bench against Man City away. I'm not actually sure whether Strand Larsen is that much better than Solanke this week, because Fulham away is probably an easier fixture than City away, but Spurs are such a stronger attacking team than Wolves, and I think Spurs will cause that Man City defence problems. So I might actually put Solanke in instead of Strand Larsen. And if there is any issues with Mbeumo or Palmer, I'll just play all 3. I think with Solanke, I mean, it's been quite funny, right? The roller coaster with him. Like, lots of people got rid before Villa, then he gets a 16-pointer, so lots of people think about getting him back. Then he blanks against Ipswich. I just think he's still a pretty solid option for the 7.5 million price that I paid. And after the City game, it's Fulham at home, Bournemouth away, Chelsea at home, Southampton away. I'd be perfectly fine with holding Solanke for all of those games. So I'm not in a major rush to get rid of him. As much as I think Isak is the better option, I'm not sure Solanke to Isak is worth worrying about when I've got so many other issues in my team. So I'm probably going to keep Solanke whatever happens. Raul Jimenez, by the way, played quite late in the international break for Mexico. And I think he got like 80 or 90 minutes in that game. But after the last international break, I think he finished at a similar time and day and he played the full game against Aston Villa. So hopefully he'll be in the team, but I wouldn't be surprised if he comes off early. But again, it's just not worth worrying about because there's bigger problems in my team to deal with. So all 3 forwards are probably staying, but I just go back to the FPL page. If I do sell Trent, which I think looks quite likely at the moment, and I bring in Lewis Hall, like I said earlier, that gives me 4.3 to spend. That would let me do Strand Larsen straight to Isak. And not only would it let me do that, it would still give me 1.4 million to spend if I want to make, a transfer. Well, obviously I will want to make future transfers, right? So 13, 14, etc. It still gives me a bit of money to spend. Now that is a structure that not many people have right now. So it'd be like a 3-4-3 most weeks with Isak and Solanke. Now most people right now have got like Haaland, maybe an Isak or Solanke, and then a cheap forward, or they've got 2 cheap forwards and one of Isak or Solanke, or something similar to that. It might be Nicholas Jackson or Havertz. But I don't think it's a major problem. And I like the fact that I can just spend the money straight away and have Isak for that West Ham at home game. It would be for a hit, but I just don't like the idea of sitting there with 4.3 million in the bank for too long. Because obviously, generally, the more money spent, the more points you're going to get. And I think in this case, after I spoke earlier about Calvert-Lewin to Strand Larsen not necessarily being a massive upgrade, Strand Larsen to Isak is a huge upgrade. But it does mean if I make that move, that I then don't get Saka. I wouldn't be able to even do Bruno to Saka, so I'd have to be okay going without him. And I'm not sure I'm okay with it. I said this before with Saka. I don't feel a pressure to buy him because I'm not going to captain him. Like, at least that would be my plan. My captain is always going to be Salah or Palmer unless something goes wrong. Like, none of the fixtures until kind of game week 18, I'd be that worried about having to captain Saka. So I don't feel an absolute need to get him. But I do think having him over Isak is probably better long term. It's just the fact that I can get Isak with the money straight away. Whereas if I want to get Saka with the Trent money, I'd have to sell in Burmo. And if he's fit, like it's Everton away, Leicester at home, I just don't want to sell him before those games. So it's a tricky position. Honestly, this week has already given me a headache. If I sell Trent, do I get Isak and just not have Saka? Or do I just have 4 million in the bank ready for game week 13, where obviously something else could just crop up instead? I'm not sure. But what I am sure about is the team looks pretty good with Isak in it for quite a few weeks. So if I just go back onto the My Team tool here, this video is all over the place, by the way. I fully appreciate that. But it's just the kind of week it is. So Strand Larsen straight up to Isak. So that gives me West Ham at home for 2 Newcastle players. I would probably still bench Solanke instead of Rodgers. And obviously I would play Lewis Hall. I'd be hoping that Pinnock is fine. And then for game week 13, I've then got Pinnock against Leicester at home, Hall against Palace away, and Gabriel and Raya against West Ham away. My midfield looks pretty good. I'd bring in Solanke instead of Rodgers. And then I'd be basically playing Solanke Fulham at home, Raul Jimenez Spurs away, Isak Palace away. And then my midfield of Salah, Palmer, Fernandes, and Burmo has got City at home, Villa at home, Everton at home, Leicester at home. So that looks pretty good. And then hopefully I wouldn't need to make a defender transfer. I could roll into game week 14. And then I've got 2 free transfers. If Rico Lewis looks like he's going to play, Forest at home's not a bad fixture. If I don't want to play Pinnock or Hall, I could even play Greaves if he's back fit. So potentially by game week 14, if I make that Isak move now, I'm kind of got 2 free transfers and not a huge amount to do with it. So then I'd be in a position to start moving things around. Like if I don't want Mbermo or Fernandes at that point, I could look to move them on. But obviously if I'm stuck with them, that's also fine to play. So I'm quite tempted to make that Isak move. The thing that I'm trying to show over the next few weeks is there's not really a week where I feel I'm massively stuck by not having Saka. I think the only doubts in my mind are I don't feel like Solanke and Isak, having both of them is also a must. Like having one is absolutely fine. So I'm really not 100% sure what to do. The other thing, by the way, while I'm rambling on, is if I do Trent to Hall, I'm so close to being able to do Rodgers to Saka, funded by Rico Lewis out. I'd have to get like a 4.2 million defender. There's really no one. That's the problem. Lewis Hall going up in price kind of killed that idea. Like even if Dunk drops to 4.3, it's not going to be enough. Like Anderson is 4.3. I just don't want 2 4.3 million defenders. I'm so close just to keeping this set up. I think Trent has to go, and I have to decide between Isak and Saka. Essentially, it would be. Sorry, I keep resetting this. Essentially, it would be Trent to Hall, and then either Mbeumo to Saka or Strand Larsen to Isak. So it'd be Strand Larsen and Saka or Mbeumo and Isak. For me, even with the more difficult fixtures that Mbeumo has, that just sounds better. Like a nailed-on 90-minute man with penalties just sounds better than Strand Larsen. So Isak and Mbeumo versus Saka and... it's close, isn't it? Honestly, I really feel like I'm going to be taking a hit this week just to spend that money and get Isak in straight away and then worry about it down the line. Like, is Saka that much of a concern? No one's going to be captaining him anytime soon. You're going to go Haaland, Salah and Palmer. I can see it already. I mean, Saka might not even be back. We might find out from Arteta that he's out. I'm going to leave it there. Been a bit of a mess, hasn't it? It's tricky with all these flags. We need more information. I think Trent's going to go. I'm probably going to get Lewis Hall. I'll probably regret that, and I probably realise I should have got Levi Colwill. And I think the most likely action is I take a hit for Isak and just ignore Saka a bit longer. I'm not 100% sure about it. Find out in final thoughts tomorrow if I'm any closer to making a decision. If you've enjoyed that absolute mess of a video, give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcast. Don't forget to check out Fantasy Football Hub using the links in the description below to make use of all the great tools they've got to help your FPL season for the rest of the game weeks that we have. 30% off, 30-day free trial as well. I'm going to leave it there before I talk any more rubbish. I'll catch you tomorrow.